I never thought betrayal could come from the person I called my sister. But life has a strange way of showing us that even the kindest hearts can hide the darkest intentions. My name is Elena, and I grew up in a quiet little town tucked between rolling hills and fading sunsets. Here, everyone knew everyone. People waved from their porches. Kids rode their bikes down the same streets their parents once did, and gossip traveled faster than the wind. It was the kind of place where dreams felt both too small, and too safe. A town that taught you how to love gently and sometimes how to hurt quietly. And then there was Clara, my best friend since childhood. If I was the calm, she was the storm. She had this effortless way of making everyone notice her. Laughter that filled a room, eyes that caught light like glass, and confidence that came from knowing she'd always be adored. But to me, she wasn't competition. She was family. We shared everything. Secrets, clothes, dreams, and late-night talks about the kind of love we wanted one day. We promised each other that no man would ever come between us. And I used to believe promises like that could never break. Our lives were simple. I worked at a small bakery on Main Street, the one with the bell over the door that jingled every time someone walked in. Clara worked at the flower shop across the road. Every morning she'd wave through the glass with a grin, her apron already dusted with petals and pollen. And we'd meet for coffee at noon, sit by the fountain in the town square, and talk about everything, our childhood memories, silly customers, and what we'd do if we ever left this little town. Those afternoons felt endless, wrapped in warmth and comfort. And then one day he walked in. It was a Thursday, I remember, because the sky was heavy with rain clouds, and the air smelled like cinnamon and fresh dough. I was wiping down the counter when the doorbell chimed. A man stepped in, tall, calm, with eyes that carried the kind of quiet you don't see often. He smiled, not the flashy kind, but the kind that felt real. "Hi," he said softly. "Do you still make those strawberry tarts everyone talks about?" I laughed. "Only if you're patient enough to wait 15 minutes, he stayed, ordered coffee. Asked questions about the town, the bakery, and somehow about me. His name was Daniel. He had just moved into the old Miller house on the edge of town, said he wanted to start fresh. I didn't ask what he meant. I could tell by his eyes that some stories weren't ready to be told yet. We talked for hours that day until Clara walked in. She froze when she saw us talking, her eyes flicking between me and Daniel with that curious smile of hers. And I didn't think much of it then. Clara was always curious about the new faces in town. I introduced them, and she, being Clara, charmed him instantly. That was just her way. She could talk to anyone, make them laugh, make them feel seen. But Daniel's eyes came back to me, and that night, for the first time in years, I couldn't sleep. Days turned into weeks. Daniel became a part of our small circle. He'd drop by the bakery, bring flowers from Clara's shop, and walk me home when the evenings got cold. Sometimes we'd sit on the porch talking about books, about the stars, about everything and nothing. He wasn't loud or dramatic. He listened, and that's what made him different. He saw me, not just the friendly baker or Clara's friend, but me. Clara noticed she always did. At first, she teased me about it. "Oh, Elena," she'd say, laughing. "You've got that look in your eyes again, the one that says you're falling for a story." I'd blush, throw a napkin at her, and change the subject. It was harmless. Or so I thought. Weeks later, Daniel asked me out properly, a real date, dinner by the lake. I still remember how nervous I was, how long I stood in front of the mirror trying to decide what to wear. Clara helped me pick the dress. It was a soft blue one, she said, made my eyes stand out. When I asked if she'd be okay if I spent less time with her for a while, she just smiled. "Don't be silly," she said. "You deserve this." For a while, everything felt perfect. Daniel and I were happy. He'd show up at the bakery early just to walk me to work. He met my parents, talked to my neighbors, and became the quiet heartbeat of my days. Clara was always there too, at first supportive, always smiling, always joking. But sometimes I'd catch her watching us, her eyes softer, quieter, unreadable. She'd pull away from conversations suddenly, or cancel our coffee plans last minute. When I asked, she'd say she was just tired, and I believed her. There was one evening I'll never forget. The three of us had gone to the summer fair. Music, lights, laughter everywhere. Daniel bought me cotton candy, and we watched fireworks by the lake. Clara stood beside us, her arms folded, smiling faintly. I turned to her and said, "Thank you, Clara, for everything." "You're the sister I never had." She didn't respond right away, just smiled, a small, strange smile. When the fireworks lit her face, I saw something I hadn't noticed before, something dark flickering behind her eyes, jealousy. Maybe pain, maybe both, but I brushed it off. I told myself it was just the light playing tricks. I didn't want to believe that she, of all people, could feel envy toward me. That was the night Daniel walked me home, and we shared our first kiss under the old oak tree near the bakery. It was simple, sweet, perfect, the kind of moment you'd want to pause forever. I remember telling Clara about it the next day, my heart racing with excitement. Cal? She listened quietly, nodded, and said, "I'm happy for you." But her smile didn't reach her eyes. Days passed, and the distance between us grew like a crack in glass. Small, almost invisible, but deepening with every passing moment. Sometimes I'd walk into the flower shop and find her lost in thought, staring at nothing. Sometimes she'd ask strange questions like, "Do you think Daniel's really the one?" Or "Are you sure he's not just being polite?" I'd laugh it off. But something inside me started to ache, a quiet unease that whispered when the nights got still. Looking back now, I can see the signs so clearly, the tiny shifts, the silences, the glances. But at the time, I was too in love to notice the storm forming on the horizon. And that was the day I saw the first crack in our friendship, though I ignored it. Section R, when love turns into competition. If I had to describe the weeks that followed, I'd say they felt off. Not broken, not yet, just different, like a song slightly out of tune where you can't tell what's wrong, but you know something is. Clara and I were still friends on the surface. We laughed, shared stories, and still met for coffee by the fountain every Thursday. But there was a strange silence hiding between our words. Now I could feel it, the weight of something unsaid. At first I told myself it was just change. People change when love enters the picture, right? Maybe she just missed the way things were before Daniel and I started dating. That's what I kept telling myself. But deep down, something didn't feel right. Clara began to act differently. It started small, Ninka, the kind of things you don't notice unless you're paying attention. Storts a Nike the kind of things you don't notice unless you're paying attention. She began to dress like me, not exactly, but close enough to make me pause. If I wore my hair in a braid one day, she'd show up the next morning with hers braided too. If I mentioned Daniel liked the color blue, she'd start wearing it, scarves, blouses, ribbons, even her nail polish. I laughed about it at first. "Look at us," I said once, "we're starting to look like twins again." She smiled. Guess we've always shared good taste, but her laughter didn't sound like it used to. There was a new edge in her voice, light but sharp. And whenever Daniel's name came up, she'd tilt her head, listen a little too carefully, ask a little too many questions. And I tried to shake it off. I didn't want to believe jealousy could live inside someone I loved like family, so I kept convincing myself I was imagining things. That's what love does. It blinds you to the shadows standing right beside you. Over time, Clara and Daniel began spending more time together, innocently at first. He'd stop by the flower shop to buy roses for me, and somehow end up staying to help her arrange bouquets. Or he'd run into her in town, and they'd chat about work, the weather, nothing important. It didn't seem suspicious, not then. After all, they were both kind people, both part of my world. Why wouldn't they get along? But soon their small interactions became more frequent. I'd hear Clara mention something Daniel said that I hadn't told her. Or Daniel would bring up something about Clara's life, things even I didn't know. They were talking privately, and every time I noticed, a quiet sting crept through my chest. One evening, Daniel came by to surprise me after work. I was still wiping flour off my hands when he walked in, holding a single daisy. My favorite. He smiled. "You've been working too hard again," but before I could respond, Clara entered the bakery, holding a basket of wildflowers. "Daniel," she said brightly, pretending not to have noticed me yet, "you forgot your jacket at the shop." My heart sank a little. I hadn't known he was there earlier. I tried to ignore it, smiled, thanked her, and changed the subject, but when she left, Daniel looked a little uneasy. "She's been having a rough day," he said quietly. "Her delivery truck broke down this morning, so I helped her carry boxes." He kissed my forehead. "You know me. Can't say no to helping a friend. A friend." And I nodded, trying to convince myself that's all it was. Still, something inside me shifted that night. I began to notice the details I once overlooked, the way Clara's tone softened when she spoke to Daniel, and the way his smile lingered half a second too long when she joked, the way my heart tightened every time they shared a moment I wasn't part of. It wasn't just jealousy, it was confusion, fear, and something far deeper, doubt. A few weeks later, the unease grew heavier. Clara started showing up uninvited when Daniel and I had plans. If he and I went for coffee, she'd happen to be nearby. If we took a walk, she'd text, "Mind if I join?" At first, I didn't want to seem possessive. So I said yes every time, but the more I said yes, the smaller I felt in my own story. Daniel didn't seem to notice. He was kind as ever, laughing, talking, treating us both with the same warmth. But that was the problem, the same warmth. It made me wonder if maybe his heart wasn't as sure as mine was. Clara, on the other hand, seemed more radiant than ever. People in town started saying things like, "Hengerschen at Stabshav, you nam sandsters. You and Clara are so close, even your boyfriend can't tell you apart." They said it as a joke, but to me it didn't sound funny anymore. There was one night I'll never forget, Makastarikan. We were all invited to the town's autumn fair again. Same music, same lanterns, same lake shimmering under the lights. It should have been magical, but something about the air felt heavy that night. Clara wore the same shade of blue I'd worn the day Daniel first asked me out. And when Daniel complimented her dress, I felt something cold spread through me. Not yet, shrieks Cole's anger. Not yet. Just coldness, the kind that tells you something's wrong even if no one says it. And later that evening, I tried to talk to Clara. Croquet. We stood by the cotton candy stand, the smell of sugar and laughter all around us. "And Clara," I said softly, "have I done something? You've been different lately." She blinked at me, surprised, then smiled. "Different? No, Elena. I'm just growing up like you." But her eyes said something else, something unspoken, something dangerous. I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to believe her. The next day, I decided to surprise Daniel at his workshop. He'd promised we'd have dinner together. He even said he had something special planned. I spent hours preparing his favorite meal, packed it neatly, and walked to his place, heart full of excitement. But when I arrived, his car wasn't there. I waited 5 minutes, 10. Then I called. He answered on the third ring, his voice soft but distant. "Elena, hey, sorry. I'm so sorry." "Something came up." "Something?" I asked. "What happened?" He hesitated. I could hear faint laughter in the background, familiar laughter. "Yeah, it's Clara," he said finally. "Her shop's closing early, and she needed help moving some things." I couldn't say no. I stood there in silence, the picnic basket still warm in my hands. He didn't notice the crack in my voice when I replied. "Of course, Daniel. She's lucky to have a friend like you." He sighed with relief. "You're the best, Elena. I'll make it up to you, I promise." I hung up before he could say more. That night, I sat alone by the window, the meal untouched. Outside, the town lights flickered softly, and the sound of distant laughter echoed from somewhere near Clara's street. It was faint, but it was enough. For the first time, I couldn't tell whether my heart was breaking or simply waking up. That was the night something inside me whispered the truth I didn't want to hear. Gantarabash, the person I trusted most, might already be taking what was mine. Some truths don't arrive like thunder. They slip in quietly, a whisper, a look, a change in the way someone says your name. And when they finally reveal themselves, it feels less like discovery and more like collapse. Davin. After that night, the one where Daniel canceled to help Clara, things started to change faster than I could keep up. He became distant, our conversations turned shorter, lighter, emptier. The warmth in his eyes, the one that once felt like home, began to fade. He still smiled, still held my hand, but his thoughts were elsewhere, and deep down, I knew exactly where. At first I tried to reason with myself. Maybe he was tired, maybe work was stressing him out, maybe I was just being paranoid, but denial is the kindest lie we tell ourselves before the truth breaks through. Then came the moment that changed everything. It was a Saturday afternoon, the kind of golden day where the air smells like autumn leaves and baked bread. The bakery was quiet, only a few customers left. I decided to visit Daniel after closing, maybe surprise him like old times. He hadn't answered my messages all morning, and something in my chest refused to settle. So I walked down the long path to the old Miller house, the one with the white fence and ivy crawling up its sides. Clara. His car was parked outside, and beside it was Clara's. My heart sank, but my feet kept moving. Maybe she needed help again, I told myself. Maybe they were just talking. But that small voice inside me, the one I'd been ignoring for weeks, whispered the truth I didn't want to hear. Candid mind, the front door wasn't locked. The front door locked. I stepped inside, calling out softly, "Daniel?" No answer. The house smelled faintly of lavender, Clara's favorite perfume. I followed the sound of laughter, low, quiet, close. They were in the living room, Daniel sitting on the couch, Clara beside him, her hand resting on his. They weren't kissing, they didn't need to be. The silence between them said enough. I stood there for a few seconds, frozen between disbelief and heartbreak. It felt like my body had forgotten how to breathe. Clara turned first. Her face paled, then flushed red. Elena, I raised a hand, my voice barely a whisper. Don't. Daniel stood, guilt written all over his face. It's not what you think, I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was so painfully predictable. Then, tell me, I said, what is it? Clara looked down. Daniel ran a hand through his hair. It just happened, he muttered. Those words, it just happened. As if love were an accident, as if betrayal were a slip of the tongue. I stared at him, feeling something inside me break in slow motion. How long? He didn't answer. Oh, Ken. So I turned to her, my best friend, my sister in everything but blood. How long, Clara? She swallowed hard. A few weeks. I wanted to scream, cry, demand answers, but no words came, only silence, thick, suffocating, final. Then Clara did something I'll never forget. She reached out, tears in her eyes, and whispered, you'll understand someday, Elena. It's not what you think. We didn't mean to hurt you, understand? I almost laughed again. How do you understand betrayal? How do you forgive someone for taking the one thing you thought was safe? I walked out without another word. I didn't slam the door, I didn't shout, I just left because sometimes silence hurts louder than anything else. The town felt different that evening, quieter, colder, as if even the wind knew what had happened. And by morning everyone else did. Small towns have their own way of spreading secrets, whispered over fences, passed around with cups of coffee. By Monday, I was no longer Elena from the bakery. I was the girl whose best friend stole her man. Igampunaware fanned. Everywhere I went, eyes followed. Pitity, judgment, curiosity, I hated all of it. So I stopped going out altogether. I quit my job at the bakery, told Mrs. Nolan I needed a break. She tried to comfort me, but even kindness felt heavy now. Every scent of vanilla, every sound of laughter, every familiar face reminded me of what I'd lost. So I stayed home, curtains drawn, phone off, heart locked away, days turned into weeks, silence became my only company. I'd lie in bed for hours, staring at the ceiling, replaying every memory, every smile, every shared secret, every moment I thought was real. I kept asking myself where I went wrong. Was I not enough, too trusting, too blind? And yet, somewhere inside the pain, another thought began to grow. It started as a whisper, faint but steady. It said you didn't lose because you loved, they lost because they lied. The world outside moved on without me. Daniel and Clara were seen together often, walking through the square, shopping at the market, pretending like nothing happened. At first, that sight shattered me, but as the weeks passed, I began to notice something else. Their smiles looked forced, their laughter short-lived, as if they were both trapped in a story they didn't know how to end. One evening, I walked down to the lake, the same one where Daniel and I had watched fireworks months ago. The air was cold, sharp, quiet. I stood by the water, watching the reflection of the moon tremble with every ripple. For the first time in weeks, I cried, not the loud, messy kind, but the silent tears that fall when there's nothing left to say. In that silence, something inside me began to shift. The pain was still there, but it was changing shape, turning from weakness into something else, something harder, something steadier. I wiped my tears, took a deep breath, and whispered into the wind. She took my love, but not my strength. That night, I made a promise to myself, not to get revenge, not yet, but to rise. Because sometimes the quietest heartbreak creates the loudest transformation. Time didn't heal me. It humbled me. At first, the days blurred together, soft and colorless. I woke up, breathed, existed, but nothing more. My reflection in the mirror looked like a stranger, pale, distant, tired of pretending that things would ever feel normal again. The town still whispered, it always does, but over time the voices grew softer, or maybe I just stopped listening. Eventually, even the pain settled like dust on old furniture, dull but still there when the light hits. I started journaling one cold evening in December. There was no plan, no structure, just words spilling onto paper like tears I hadn't cried. At first, the pages were angry. How could they? Why her? Why me? But slowly, anger turned to questions, and then to clarity. The more I wrote, the more I realized something simple and terrifying. I had built my world around people who were never strong enough to stand inside it. The pages became my therapy. Every night I wrote, sometimes one line, sometimes 10 pages. Not to remember them, but to remember myself. To remind the broken girl in the mirror that she was still here, still breathing, still capable of something beyond pain. By spring, the world outside had thawed, and so had I. I started working again part-time quietly at the library this time. The scent of old books and the sound of silence felt safe. People greeted me cautiously, their voices soft, eyes kind, and I realized something else. I no longer cared what they thought. Then came the whispers, not about me this time, but about them, Daniel and Clara. It started small, overheard murmurs at the market, fragmented words that drifted my way. Did you hear? Kakar bashable prickshan and basting shushan the borzen tensadanj and furus episakshand. They were arguing again. Clara looked furious yesterday. At first I ignored it. I didn't want to know. But the universe has a strange way of returning truths we never ask for. One afternoon, as I was shelving books, Miss S. Nolan, the same woman who owned the bakery, stopped by. She looked hesitant, her kind eyes flicking toward me before she spoke. I probably shouldn't say this, dear, but Clara came by yesterday. She didn't look well, said Daniel's been distant lately. I just nodded, pretending to focus on arranging the books. And inside, I felt nothing, no joy, no satisfaction, just quiet confirmation of something I already knew. Love built on betrayal never stands for long. Weeks passed, and the cracks in their perfect picture widened. I saw them once walking past the square. Clara's face tight with frustration, Daniel's jaw clenched, both pretending not to notice me. I didn't flinch. I didn't look away. For the first time, they were the ones uneasy under my gaze. At night, I would sit by the window with my journal open, reflecting on how everything had changed. I no longer wanted Daniel back. I no longer wanted Clara's apology. What I needed, was to become someone unrecognizable to the girl they broke. And that realization hit me like sunrise after a long winter. I had lost everything I thought defined me, and yet I was still here. That meant I could rebuild on my own terms, in my own image. I began to change quietly. Morning runs replaced sleepless nights, books replaced memories, peace replaced pain. And with every passing day I felt something new inside me, not bitterness, not hatred, but purpose. And still, the past had a way of testing me. One evening, Clara came to my door. Her hair was messy, eyes red, voice trembling. Elena, please, can we talk? I stood in the doorway, silent. A year ago, I would have pulled her in, made tea, tried to understand. But now, I simply asked, why? She hesitated. I made mistakes. Daniel and I were not... It's complicated. I raised an eyebrow. You mean it's not the fairy tale you stole? Her lip quivered. You don't understand. No, I said softly. I understand perfectly. You wanted something that wasn't yours, and now you have to live with it. There was no rage in my tone, just truth. She left in tears, and I closed the door feeling free. That night, I wrote the simplest entry in my journal. She broke me. He betrayed me. She broke me. He betrayed me. But they freed me. And from that moment, I stopped being the victim of their choices. I became the author of my own. The town kept talking, but this time I didn't hide from it. I walked with my head high, greeted everyone, smiled even. People noticed the change. They whispered again, but differently. Now, because she looked stronger, she's changed. Yes, I had, and yet, deep inside, something darker began to take shape, not anger, but precision. The desire to reclaim control. Not through violence or cruelty, not through violence or cruelty, but through power, through silence, success, and subtle truth. I started writing stories, fictional ones, though everyone in town could guess where the inspiration came from. Each tale spoke of trust and deceit, of love and betrayal. People read them, they praised them. Even Daniel's mother told me once, your stories feel so real. I smiled. They are. As my words spread, something beautiful happened. People began to see them differently. Not because I accused or exposed, but because I simply told the truth, dressed as fiction, and Clara and Daniel became uncomfortable shadows of their former selves. They avoided me in public, their eyes heavy with guilt and fear of what I might write next. But I never confronted them again. I didn't need to. They were already living inside the cage they built. And me, I was finally free. One night, as I sat at my desk, the lamp's glow soft against my pages, I reread my first journal entry, the one filled with tears and pain. I barely recognized that girl anymore. She was gone. In her place stood someone quieter, sharper, stronger. I closed my journal, took a deep breath, and smiled faintly. Revenge wasn't my plan. I whispered to the empty room. It became my purpose. Returning to town after months away felt like stepping into a dream I had once loved and lost. I walked down the familiar streets, my heels clicking against the cobblestones, and everything seemed smaller somehow, smaller than the memories I had built in my mind. But the air smelled the same. The wind carried the scent of bakery bread, lavender from Clara's shop, and the faint tang of the lake. It was familiar, comforting, and mine again, but I was different. Not just taller or leaner, not just calmer, but something deeper. I carried myself with a grace I had never known before. Quiet yet undeniable, people noticed. Neighbors who once called my name from their porches nodded with newfound respect. Clara noticed too, though I could tell she tried not to. She was the first person I saw when I returned. Her smile was nervous, uneven, her eyes darted to mine, then away. I waved, warm and casual, like nothing had happened. She froze for a moment, then smiled back, smaller than before. There was a tension in her posture I hadn't seen in years, and I smiled faintly to myself, not cruelly, but knowingly. I opened a small boutique on Main Street, a cozy, elegant space that reflected me. Soft lighting, warm colors, hand-selected items that felt personal and unique. People came in, admired the care I put into everything, and word spread quickly. I didn't boast. I didn't ask for attention, it found me naturally, drawn to the confidence I carried like a secret cloak. Slowly, I began to re-enter the social circles I had once avoided. I attended town events, helped organize community fairs, even spoke at the local library about small businesses and creativity. Everyone was polite, welcoming, but under the surface I could feel eyes measuring me, questioning my sudden transformation. And that included Clara. She tried, as she always did, to act like nothing had happened. She laughed a little too loudly when I mentioned Daniel casually, tried to stand near me at social gatherings, and even complimented my shop with a sweetness that felt forced. I played along, I smiled, I nodded, and inside I counted every little misstep she made, every nervous glance, every faint tremor in her voice. The revenge I had imagined wasn't about yelling or accusations, it wasn't about shaming them publicly, it was subtle, psychological. It was about reclaiming my life and letting them realize, slowly, painfully, what they had lost. At first it was small things. I mentioned Daniel in passing at events softly without emotion. I spoke of love, loyalty, and trust in my talks at the library. People listened, they nodded, they whispered. Clara heard, I knew she did, and she flinched. Next came my boutique. I hired locals, people knew she knew and respected. I welcomed everyone with warmth, charm, and professionalism. And Clara tried to match me, started attending my events, offering her help, pretending friendship. But there was a hollow in her gestures I could see clearly, and the town noticed too. I didn't confront her. I didn't need to. Every smile I offered, every success I quietly celebrated chipped away at her false confidence. Every time someone complimented me, it was a reminder of what she could no longer control. And I watched. I waited. Even Daniel came around occasionally. He greeted me politely, hesitant, trying to gauge who I had become. I returned his greetings warmly, casually, not warmth for him, just for the scene. I wanted him to see it, the distance I had built, the strength I carried, and he did. He noticed. Months passed, and Clara grew smaller in her own eyes. Where once she had swaggered through life, now she measured every word, every gesture. Her laughter became tighter. Her smiles shorter. The town, my silent witnesses, began to notice the cracks she tried desperately to hide. One evening, at a community fundraiser, I arrived late, as I often did. Clara was already there, serving drinks with a strained smile. Daniel stood nearby, polite but distant, glancing at me as if expecting a different version of the girl he once knew. And Clara approached me, careful, almost rehearsed. "Alina," she said, voice soft. "You look wonderful." I smiled. "Thank you, Clara. You look well, too." Her eyes flicked away. I could see the guilt, the shame, the fear lurking behind her polite words. I didn't speak of the past. I didn't need to. Every detail of her discomfort, every twitch of her expression, every slight falter in her steps was my victory. She thought I forgave her. She thought the old Elena, the broken, hurt girl, had returned, but I hadn't. I was stronger now, quietly powerful, and she could see it. That night, as the moon reflected off the town square, I walked home alone. The streets were empty, silent, and soft. I passed Clara's house and slowed down, listening, and voices inside hers and Daniel's raised slightly in frustration. I smiled softly. The plan had begun, not with confrontation, not with anger, but with the simple truth I had rebuilt myself, and in doing so, I had become the shadow of her fears. I whispered into the night as I passed the old bakery. She thought I forgave her. That was my first victory, and for the first time in months, I felt complete. I was no longer just Alina, the girl they had hurt. I was Elena, the woman they would never underestimate again. The storm hadn't yet arrived, but it was coming. And I would be standing at the eye of it, calm, composed, unshakable. I watched from a distance as the threads of their perfect little world began to fray, and not through malice, not through confrontation, but quietly, naturally, like a storm weakening a house that was never built on solid ground. Clara's confidence, which had always been so effortless, started to wobble. The way she carried herself in the town square, once proud and magnetic, now carried tension and hesitation. Even Daniel, who had once been so attentive, now seemed to drift, distracted, polite, no longer enamored with her the way he once had been. It wasn't my doing, not directly, but my presence, my quiet return had shifted the balance. She noticed the respect, the admiration, the gentle nods that followed me wherever I went, and I could see it in her eyes, envy, fear, and the creeping realization that the world had moved on without her control. I continued my routine, quiet and composed. My boutique thrived. Now, people came to me with ideas, seeking advice, drawn to my calm confidence. I attended events with understated elegance. No announcements, no declarations, only the natural gravity of someone who had rebuilt herself. And everywhere I went, Clara watched. She started to mirror me again, just like in the past. Not an innocent imitation this time. No, it was desperate, like trying to reclaim what she had lost. She wore the styles I wore, laughed at the jokes I told first, even carried herself in ways she thought I would approve. But it was hollow. The town could see it, and more importantly, I could see it. Daniel's attention faded even further. He would answer her politely, smile politely, but the spark that had once drawn him to her was gone. She tried to fill it with charm and theatrics, but it was too late. Every word, every gesture seemed forced, calculated, and unconvincing. Rumors began to resurface quietly at first. Old whispers of betrayal, the secret meetings, the stolen love, memories of their own wrongdoings circulating like wildfire in hushed conversations. People noticed the tension between them. They noticed Clara's nervous laughter, her forced smiles, the subtle cracks in her confidence, and yet I remained silent. I didn't point fingers, I didn't reveal what I knew. I simply existed, a living reminder of the truth. It was astonishing to watch how naturally life began to expose them. No accusations from me, no confrontations. The weight of their choices, the guilt they carried, and the judgment of the town did all the work for me. It was subtle, poetic, and devastating in its precision. The final unraveling came at the town's annual spring festival. The square was alive with color and music, the scent of flowers and fresh bread drifting on the wind. I arrived quietly, dressed in soft green that caught the sunlight just so, my hair braided simply. I walked through the crowd, nodding politely, smiling warmly at familiar faces, unaware of the drama unfolding just steps away. Clara was there too, bright, radiant, trying desperately to appear composed. Daniel was with her, holding her hand with a polite, neutral grip. I noticed immediately that the crowd sensed the tension. Whispers followed them, eyes flicked to them, and I knew the stage was set. A local journalist, someone who knew the town's gossip as well as its history, approached Clara. "Clara," she said, smiling, "people have been curious. What happened between you and Elena last year? Can you tell us?" Clara's face froze. Her practiced smile faltered. I could see it in every micro-expression, fear, panic, a desperate scramble to maintain control. Daniel shifted uncomfortably beside her, guilt written clearly on his face. Clara started, her voice shaky. It was complicated. We were young, mistakes were made. The crowd leaned in, listening, sensing the tension. I stepped closer, casually greeting an old neighbor as if nothing had happened. And then, a soft voice from the crowd, familiar to all, someone who had once witnessed their betrayal, spoke up. They were together behind Elena's back. She deserves to know the truth. Clara's face turned pale. Daniel's jaw tightened. The crowd murmured, whispers growing louder, questions tossed like stones in the quiet square. I didn't speak, I didn't need to. I simply observed, standing with calm grace, the quiet epicenter of truth in the middle of chaos. Every word they fumbled, every glance they exchanged, every faltering denial exposed the cracks they had tried so hard to hide. And then it happened. A child in the crowd, innocent and unfiltered, shouted, "Why did you lie to Elena?" The sound cut through the festival like glass. The crowd gasped. Clara's facade broke completely. Her composure vanished. She stepped back, hands trembling, eyes wide, unable to meet anyone's gaze. Daniel reached for her, but she pulled away, shaking her head. The journalist, sensing the collapse, asked again, "Yo, Clara, Daniel, is this true?" Clara couldn't answer. Her voice cracked, a small, pained sound that exposed everything. Daniel looked down, ashamed, unable to speak, and there I stood, silent, calm. and watching the people who had tried to betray me crumble under the weight of their own choices. I felt no gloating, no triumph born of cruelty. It was simply justice. The kind of justice that arrives naturally when truth is patient and the deceivers are impatient. People began to approach me softly with whispers of sympathy and admiration. Thank you for being strong. You've handled everything with such grace you didn't need to fight. You let the truth do it for you. I nodded quietly, letting them speak. Because I had learned long ago that the loudest victories don't come from shouting. They come from rising above, from letting life itself reveal what words cannot. Clara stood to the side, her pride shattered, her confidence gone, the admiration she once commanded evaporating. She looked at me for a long, fleeting second, and in her eyes I saw recognition, reculation of power. Recognition of loss, recognition of what she had truly taken from me, and what she could never return. I walked past her, the sunlight warming my face, the murmur of the crowd fading into a quiet hum. I didn't need to say a word. She had already seen the consequences. The world had already noticed. And in that moment, I whispered softly to myself, almost like a mantra. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't confront. And I didn't fight. But the truth, it always finds its way. The festival continued around me. Laughter, music, flowers, sunlight. But in one corner, two people I once called friend and love stood exposed, their carefully constructed illusions falling apart. And I realized for the first time in months I felt the calm satisfaction of justice done. Not vengeance born of hate, not chaos, but quiet, patient, inevitable truth. That day marked the beginning of the final act. Clara had lost the social control she once wielded. Daniel had lost the attention and admiration he took for granted. And I had risen stronger, untouchable, and fully aware of the power that comes from quiet resilience. The unraveling wasn't complete, but it had begun, and I was ready for whatever came next. It all came to a head one cool evening at the town square, the same place where so many memories had been made, and so many had been broken. The air was crisp, scented with blooming jasmine and freshly baked bread from nearby shops. The festival had ended, leaving behind only the faint echo of music and laughter like ghosts of happier times. I was closing my boutique for the day, the soft lamplight spilling onto the cobblestones, when I saw her, Clara. Her steps were quick, uneven, her expression raw with a mix of fear, desperation, and anger. She stopped in front of me, chest heaving, eyes glistening with tears she didn't bother to hide. "Elena," she gasped. "We need to talk, please. Just hear me out." Why, he calmed. I looked at her calmly, letting the quiet strength I had cultivated over months shine in my posture. Her urgency, once intimidating, now seemed almost pathetic, and I realized something. She had never known the woman I had become. Yet the girl she betrayed was gone. The woman she faced now was untouchable. I nodded slowly. "All right, Clara, let's talk." Her lips trembled. I didn't mean for things to go this far. You have to believe me, Daniel. A sample scherps de set, angoisteren saving van danschban sturs to the subscher and toe trier. I didn't. Stop, I said, my voice steady, soft but sharp. She blinked, confused, searching for the anger she expected. Yet there's nothing left to explain. You took everything from me, my trust, my love, my peace, my. And yet I chose to rise above it. I chose not to fight, not because I forgave you, but because I am stronger than your betrayal. Clara's eyes widened, her shoulders sagging slightly. Kekanasing de steppery. She opened her mouth, then closed it, trying to form words. Any words that could patch the cracks she had created. You don't understand. I tilted my head, letting the quiet settle like a weight in the space between us. You'll understand soon enough, I said, calm and unwavering. You took everything from me, and still I chose peace. But peace doesn't mean I forgot. Peace doesn't mean I let you win. I let life itself deliver the consequences, and it has. Her face turned pale. She looked past me at the crowd of townspeople who had slowly gathered, curious whispers turning into visible judgment. Whispers I had never needed to encourage. Their eyes were full of the truth. The betrayed had risen, and the betrayer was exposed. She tried again, desperation cracking her voice. Elena, please. I never wanted to hurt you. I held up a hand, stopping her mid-word. Look around you, Clara, I said softly. You can't. Your words, your actions, your lies, they have consequences. You lost Daniel because you were never honest with yourself or with anyone else. You lost your friends because trust is built slowly and shattered quickly, and now you are alone. You've lost love, reputation, and peace. The three things most people spend their lives chasing. Cats, all because of your choices. Her knees weakened slightly, her hands trembled at her sides. I could see the collapse, not physical but far deeper, the collapse of a carefully constructed world built on deception. Daniel had arrived by now, standing a few steps behind her, silent. His eyes, once warm and attentive toward her, now held only disappointment and resignation. She reached for him instinctively, as if clinging to the last thread of security she thought she had. He stepped back. "I can't do this anymore," he said, voice firm but sorrowful. "I'm leaving, Clara. I've already lost too much trying to hold on to what should have been." Her mouth opened, a cry forming, but no sound came. The crowd had grown, but no one interfered. They watched silently, bearing witness to a reckoning that needed no commentary. Every gesture, every word, every silence amplified the truth. Clara's facade, which had once dazzled the town, shattered completely in the light of reality. She sank to a bench, her head in her hands, her shoulders shaking. No amount of tears could repair the bridges she burned, and I realized then that the lesson had been delivered. Not by my hands, not by cruelty, but by the natural flow of consequence. And I took a step back, giving her the space to crumble. I didn't need to gloat, to mock, or to humiliate. The quiet satisfaction of justice, patience, calm, inevitability was far more powerful than any display of anger. The town slowly returned to its normal rhythm, murmurs fading into background noise. People gave me nods of respect. Some whispered quietly about the ordeal, but no one spoke loudly. It wasn't necessary. The point had been made. Aganda, I turned toward the streets I had once walked with her and Daniel. The memory of heartbreak, of stolen love, of betrayal, all remained, but they no longer weighed me down. I had reclaimed everything that mattered, my peace, my dignity, my sense of self. Before leaving, I glanced back once. Clara's tear-streaked face, Daniel's silent departure, the tableau of reckoning. It wasn't revenge in its raw, fiery form. It was subtle, careful, and undeniable. The power of truth, patience, and resilience had done what anger could never have achieved. And in that moment, I whispered to the night, letting the words settle in the cool evening air. Taught me betrayal. I taught her consequences. I walked away then, slow and steady, the warm glow of the street lamps guiding me. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I was free. Freedom felt quiet. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was calm. It was inevitable. And for the first time in a long time, I felt whole. No more betrayal. No more manipulation. No more shadows lurking behind smiles. I had reclaimed myself entirely. And somewhere deep inside, I knew this story, my story, would linger in the town for years. Not as gossip, not as scandal, but as a lesson, that betrayal can destroy the naive. But resilience, patience, and truth can destroy the betrayer even more. I walked through the square, past the fountain, past the lights and echoes of the festival. The wind brushed against my cheeks, carrying the scent of spring flowers and freedom. I smiled softly, lifting my chin slightly, because she had taught me betrayal, and I had taught her consequences. The night was still, the air crisp, and I felt the quiet strength of a story complete. After the storm had passed, the town slowly settled into its rhythms, oblivious to the quiet upheaval that had reshaped lives and hearts. I walked through the familiar streets, not as the girl who had been betrayed, not as the woman who sought revenge, but as someone entirely new, someone whole. The boutique hummed quietly behind me, warm light spilling through its windows. Inside, everything was carefully arranged, reflecting a life rebuilt with thought, patience, and care. People came in with smiles, bringing questions, curiosities, or simply stopping to admire the calm grace that had come to define me. I realized something important. Revenge had never been about hurting Clara or Daniel. It had never been about proving them wrong or exposing them publicly. It had been about reclaiming myself, my dignity, my confidence, my life. I had spent months in grief, isolation, and reflection. I had let anger and pain shape me for a while, but ultimately, I had chosen a different path, one of growth, quiet strength, and purpose. I had allowed the natural course of truth and life to do what shouting and confrontation never could. In the evenings, I often sat by my window, journal in hand, reflecting on the journey. I wrote about heartbreak, betrayal, patience, and resilience. An X-1000 and they wrote patience. I traced every memory of Daniel and Clara, not with bitterness, but with clarity. Each word reminded me how far I had come, how much I had grown, and how much strength had always been inside me, even when I thought it was lost. Sometimes I revisited the places of my past, the lake where Daniel and I once watched fireworks, the bakery where I had worked tirelessly, the square where I faced Clara in public. And each time I felt a sense of calm. I didn't feel the weight of betrayal anymore. I didn't feel the sting of loss or the ache of regret. Instead, I felt balance, wisdom, and the quiet joy of living on my own terms. Forgiveness, I realized, had little to do with them. It had everything to do with me. Like, I didn't need to forgive to move forward. I needed to release the hold their actions had on my heart. We hurt. By letting go, I discovered freedom. By choosing peace, I discovered power. The town, once a place of whispered rumors and judgment, became a canvas for the life I wanted to paint. I wasn't seeking attention or revenge anymore. I was simply living quietly and purposefully, showing that a life rebuilt with patience, care, and self-respect is stronger than any betrayal could ever destroy. Clara and Daniel continue their lives, each carrying their choices. I never reached out, never needed to. They were reminders, but no longer chains. Their presence, distant and diminished, became background to my growth, not obstacles. I found joy in small things, the smile of a customer, the first bloom of spring in my garden, the satisfaction of creating something. I found purpose in helping others, sharing my experiences, mentoring those who struggled with betrayal, and writing stories that resonated with truth and resilience. And in those moments of quiet reflection, I understood the truest form of revenge. It was not cruelty. It was not retaliation. It was living a life so full, so vibrant, so untouchable that no betrayal, no deception, no attempt to harm could ever reach it. Sometimes, at night, when the streetlights glow softly against the cobblestones, I smile to myself. I think about the girl I once was, lost in heartbreak and pain, and the woman I became, standing tall in calm strength. The journey had been painful. The lessons had been harsh. But every tear, every sleepless night, every moment of doubt had led me here, to peace. I have learned that life has a way of balancing itself. Those who betray, who manipulate, who deceive will eventually face consequences. Not always through anger or revenge, but through the inevitable truth of actions catching up with choices. And for those left behind, those who feel broken, there is hope, strength, dignity, and purpose can always be reclaimed. Looking back, I don't feel anger anymore. I don't feel the sharp edges of betrayal. I feel gratitude for the pain that taught me, for the loss that strengthened me, and for the quiet, unshakable life I now lead. And I know without a doubt the moral of my story. Sometimes the sweetest revenge is living a life that no betrayal can touch. I close my journal, the soft lamplight reflecting off the pages, and breathe in the calm of the evening. The past remains as memories always do, but it no longer defines me. I walk forward free, whole, and certain of one truth: I am stronger than what tried to break me. I am at peace.